We move to North America now, and Mike Waltz, the outgoing NSA, responded to his removal on X, saying, "I'm honoured to continue serving President Trump and our nation." Trump has removed the National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and appointed Secretary of State Marco Rubio as his interim replacement, marking the first major shake-up of Trump's inner circle since taking office in January. In a social media post, Trump said he would nominate Waltz to serve as US Ambassador to the United Nations, praising his work on behalf of the country. Sources say the decision to remove Waltz followed internal criticism and a controversial March incident involving a signal chat discussing a US military strike in Yemen. Rubio will now hold both the roles of Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, a rare move last seen in the 1970s under Henry Kissinger. The change comes amid a wave of personnel changes within the National Security Council, including the departure of Waltz's deputy Alex Wong and over 20 other NSC staffers since April. Tensions have been rising with the NSC following a list of allegedly disloyal staff given to Trump by right-wing activist Laura Loomer, prompting a series of unexplained firings. Waltz's departure raises questions among allies in Europe and Asia who had seen him as a stabilising voice in the administration. The United Nations post to which Waltz has been nominated has been vacant since Trump withdrew his previous nominee, New York Republican Representative Elise Stefanik, to maintain votes in the House of Representatives. Well, joining us to discuss this big shake-up in Trump's top team is Ambassador Suresh Goel, a former diplomat, joining us from New Delhi. Ambassador Goel, thank you ever so much for being here with us today. Is this as simple as the signal chat leak and scandal has now been answered and Trump has laid that blame on Mike Waltz?
Good afternoon. In fact, I was very surprised when Mike Waltz continued to be the NSA despite all the bloomers that he did in terms of not just the leak on the signal to a journalist, but also the way he was carrying out the policies of the USA, including in the Middle East. I would say some of them were not really, to my mind, the kind of policy, the kind of actions that the USA should have taken, given that they were already quite deeply engaged with Israel and what was happening in Gaza. So that was rather overstretching and also, in a sense, jeopardizing the marine connectivity through the Red Sea and the Gulf of Yemen, rather than easing the situation. So in that sense, Mike Waltz going from the NSS post, it was long overdue to my mind, and it is just that it has happened now. Yes.
Yes, Ambassador Goel. Of course, there have been firings within the department, which the people who've been fired have called out against, saying that they wanted an investigation following this signal chat leak. Is there a question to be answered by the Trump administration as to why this movement, at least in designation for Mike Waltz, happened so late? We know that this chat leak was in March and we're now in May. So what do you think the reason is for that?
But very difficult to guess. I suppose that President Trump was preoccupied with many other things, with many other executive orders. Economy is just one of them. The way it has gone, it has been going steeply down. The situation in Ukraine, the deal which has been announced today. So there were, I'm sure there were so many other commitments that this probably became rather less important as compared to the others. But it had to happen sooner or later. As far as firing of the other people in the National Security Secretariat is concerned, that's something very usual, not very common. When the big boss is going, there'll be some other smaller fries who will be actually taking the fall with him. I really wouldn't pay much attention to that really. But what I would be interested in knowing is, as it happens, who is going to take over as the NSA, because I'm quite certain that Rubio is not Henry Kissinger, and I don't think, given the work pressure, he will be able to continue as both the State Secretary and the NSA. So let us see who takes over. That will be interesting.
Absolutely, Ambassador Goel. I want to look as well at the part that Pete Hegseth may have played in this incident. Of course, we know that he had his wife, he had his brother, he had his lawyer, reportedly in this Signal chat. Why is Hegseth not losing his role in Trump's top team?
I don't see it did not become a public issue as it became in the case of Tim Waltz. Tim Waltz, the whole story was reported in the newspaper by the journalist who was given access to what was happening. He gave the whole thing. It became a public spectacle, really. Hegseth, I really wouldn't condone that behavior, but I think it's lesser of a crime rather than what Tim Waltz did.
Why do you think that, Ambassador Goel? Because many people have said that Hegseth, as the Defence Secretary, sharing information in a Signal chat and also having people in that chat that don't have potentially the security clearance to know this information. Why is what he's done any lesser than Mike Waltz allegedly accidentally adding in this Atlantic journalist?
As I said earlier, of course, strictly speaking, again, it's a serious security risk and should not be condoned. But I called it lesser because it did not become public information as it happened in the case of Waltz. So the whole information becoming public and the way the security discussions were being conducted by the NSA, I think that just could not have been forgiven.
Ambassador Goel, I'd like to look now at Marco Rubio, who will become the first person to have this National Security Advisor role and Secretary of State since the 1970s. How do you think Marco Rubio will be able to balance these two extremely important positions given the extent of the geopolitical instability?
In a sense, there is considerable overlap between the work of the NSA and the State Secretary, but I also said that the pressure of the two work combined is going to be huge, and Marco Rubio is no Henry Kissinger, and therefore to compare the situation of 70s with what is happening now is not going to be fair. The work pressure has increased. Sooner or later, there will have to be a new NSA, and it will be interesting to see who takes over the position, because in a sense, NSA and the Secretary of State are the two most important pillars of the foreign policy and the strategic positioning of a country, and a country particularly like the USA, which is one of the most important top power in the world.
Yes, Ambassador Goel, we of course have just had Trump's 100 days in office, a big celebration where he was commending the work that he'd done, calling it historic, also celebrating his work on immigration and other key areas. How embarrassing is this incident and this removal of a member of his top team, given those messages that he's continued to say regarding the strength of his second term so far?
Very embarrassing, very, very embarrassing. As I said before, only it's not something that that shows the Trump government in good light. Nothing to do with the immigration, but the fact is that to have one of the government floundering from one bloomer to the other is not going to really, stand in good stead for Trump. But I think Trump has taken a good decision by asking Waltz to go, but to give him the position as a UN ambassador is something that I don't know how it is going to go down with people. But ambassador to the United Nations is really not such a great shake. So it will be as it is, yeah.
Absolutely. And Ambassador Goel, to end our discussion, the European Union and European nations' thoughts, as we mentioned in the read earlier, that Waltz was a sort of anchor to the Trump administration's policies. We know that he has also been hawkish on his foreign policy with Russia, China, Iran. Given the divide that we're seeing that is growing between Western nations and other powers, how significant will this move be to the wider world and the US foreign policy?
You mean making Rubio both the NSA and the State Secretary?
Yes, and removing
Yeah.
Waltz, who was looked at by other world leaders as a strong figure within that administration.
I think it's a very temporary kind of a positioning, really. I don't think Rubio can really do justice to both the job, and therefore we will need to wait and see who comes in. That will be the moment to really work on where Trump is positioning his foreign policy and the strategic positions.
Ambassador Suresh Goel, thank you ever so much.